Hi, Ollie. Chris Wareheim again. Glad we get to work together after the weekend. Had a chance to look over the video. Yeah, definitely a big improvement, more representative of where you're at. I think the main thing I want to work on right now or kind of discuss and kind of the area I think we're probably losing the most time is our braking technique. Obviously you're trying to brake as late as possible, but I think in some cases that's hurting you. And honestly, especially on a tire like this, if you just go even 1 foot over the limit initially, you're gonna hold the brake too long and you're gonna hold that heavy pressure too long. It's pretty much a cliff. It's not like a gradual you know like linear kind of regression as you go over the limit. When you're over the limit, it's very, especially in the brakes, if you're at the limit and you go just over, it's very hard uh to kind of get back under the limit or get kind of back on the limit. You'll see races and people talk about when an incident happens in the brake zone, well, that guy should have slowed down more. If someone hits someone in the brake zone, well, if he's on the limit and he goes over the limit and he locks it like tires, well, he's already at the limit, right? Or over it. There's no coming back from that. So you're kind of at that cusp where I think there's a few areas where we're just trying to brake just that little bit too late, or even maybe when we're not braking too late, we're just holding that heavy pressure too long, and we end up over slowing the car in the middle of the corner or as we start to turn in. So it either creates understeer when we've gone over, or we're kind of at the limit or just under the limit and we still hold that pressure too long. So let's use our annotation here and just kind of discuss what that kind of looks like. So down here in the black, kind of by your steering wheel, I'm going to draw in green kind of what a kind of perfect brake trace would look like in a heavy brake zone. Right. Kind of be shaped a little bit like that. What's happening is you're braking just past the limit. That we have to hold this kind of, let me get my pointer out here. Right here, this is kind of, this arrow right here is kind of about where you start to turn in, right? So already, as you're kind of you're doing your downshifts, you're thinking about, starting to turn into the corner and say, maybe this is our apex, this third one. You have this big area in the middle here. I'm gonna paint yellow here. This area in yellow here is the area where we should be releasing brake pressure. We should be starting to get that platform to go from heavy on the nose to you're still going to keep weight on the nose because you want that to help the car rotate on the nose. But we want that platform to go from, heavy on the nose to start leveling out a little bit more as we start to kind of turn into the corner. So in this yellow area, what's happening is our speed is drastically coming down. So let's draw a kind of a speed trace next to that. So in green, this is kind of like what a really good speed trace would look like. It would kind of come down, good linear, and back up, right? So that's like a hairpin type corner. What's happening is you're braking just a little bit too late. We carry just a little bit too much speed in, but then we have to hold the brake pressure, right? So your speed actually drops a little bit too much. They were maybe a little bit late to power in some of the corners, and we just lose that speed on the exit. So just that little bit over the limit, right when we go to the brakes, because we have to hold that brake pressure for too long, it slows us down too much on the entry of the corner. So let's go ahead and start the lap, and we can kind of discuss that and look at some areas. So coming up through turn one, you know, not bad. You know, I think you could have gotten away with no brakes up the hill. You know, if you want to kind of go back, I think that could have been just a long coast. You know, but other than that, not so bad. You know, I think just kind of coming up the hill, you know, it could have been a longer coast or stay in the throttle or kind of like bleed off the throttle a little bit slower to keep that speed up a little bit longer, maybe even a little bit of gas and brake. I'm not sure exactly how this car would handle that. But even just like a little bit of like you're coming off your 20% throttle and you're just a little bit of brake, just not to over slow the car where you feel like you kind of have to go back to power because you kind of slowed down the car enough where you probably could have gone back to power for a second. And in that corner, we really don't want that feeling too much, you know, in a car like this. Coming down into 3. Not bad. I think we slowed down a little bit too much for 3. You can see how aggressively we were able to go back to power there. I would have liked to see you use, kind of like we discussed in the first video, just using that camber of the road a little bit more. Good top of the hill, though. Could have used a little bit more track, gone back to power a little bit earlier. I definitely think, so 2 things. Concept wise, if you're kind of in between gears and you're like, look, I can't make second gear work. I feel like I'm too high in the revs. I have to upshift right away. I lose time. I have to overslow the car to get into second. You know, that's I can understand that. But third, you're having trouble rolling speed to make it work. One thing that helps is backing up the corner a little bit so that you aren't bringing the RPMs down as much. So if you're having to run a higher gear, third gear instead of second gear, what your goal is to not drive in as deep. Try to be able to get off the brake sooner, pick up the throttle sooner, maybe even turn in just a slightly later, so that you can keep the RPMs up earlier in the corner so you're not dropping the RPMs down too much. I can see where second gear would be, you know, a little bit tough. So choosing third, you know, that has to be your thought process. Okay, I need to focus on my exit. I need to back up the corner a little bit. I can still carry the speed, but I need to do it a little bit differently. You know, and if you kind of go down the second gear route, you can drive it in a lot harder, you know, try to make up some of that time on the entry of the corner, you know, overslow the apex than what's optimal, but not what's optimal for second gear, you know, and that kind of, you know, you can make up ground. So normally say, you know, if you have a car that has a lot of torque, right? And that's where you can really, you know, you have a lot of bottom end compared to another car or like a multi-class. You can generally drive the car in harder because you know you have more torque, right? So you can kind of make that up. If you're a car that doesn't have that bottom end, doesn't have that torque, but you're really good mid to top, you know, you maybe will try to keep that momentum up a little bit more. So when you have to run that higher gear, you have to think about that momentum a little bit more. Solid through 5. Sounds like we're flat through there, which is good. Coming down the carousel, I think what we could have done a little bit differently, and I understand this is a hard corner to find the limit and not be over or under. So I think we could have broke a little bit lighter, but held the brake longer. As we kind of started to really turn that input in, we could have been bleeding off that last 5%. That would have helped kind of carry the more speed in, but also keep that front tucked underneath of us. Because you can see here, you're really, really delayed. And our speed really starts to drop. Let me just go back a little bit more. So I would generally like to kind of maybe be right about here, be pretty close to my minimum speed. You see, we drop all the way down to 66. I would have liked to be slowed up a little bit earlier and maintain that speed all the way through. And I think we could have done that you know, okay, maybe we can't brake, you know, much or we can brake longer, right? But maybe we couldn't brake lighter, but we could have gotten that minimum speed down a little bit earlier, because again, you see how hard we're able to get back to power, which is good. We get really good exit here, but I feel like through the middle we sacrificed a little bit. So here's another good example. You see how hard we're able to get back to throttle. I feel like we could have gotten our minimum speed. I guess our minimum speed's just about right. I just don't like how it really cliffs off. I feel like we could have just, again, kind of started to release the heavy pressure sooner. Start releasing heavy pressure sooner, but hold the brake a little bit longer. So sometimes, actually, good job using the track there better this time. You know, sometimes carrying the brake longer with very light pressure will actually allow you to carry more minimum speed through, especially like a double apex corner like that. You know, so you can kind of trick yourself into, oh, I need to get off the brake, but you stayed on the brake way too long, too heavy, and overslowed the corner. So yeah, you're off the brake sooner, but you aren't carrying more speed through the corner. So that, you know, you kind of got to get a better feel for that, kind of that feeling of like, okay, that's what my speed should be, not, oh, well, I'm off the brake, so I'm carrying speed now, because that isn't always the case. Much better. Much better. Okay. So for the second S, anytime that you need to make a lift as just a speed adjustment and you're kind of going on to a straightaway, right? We want to make that lift sooner than later, because we're trying to elongate the straightaway, right? The point that I get back to full power is essentially where that straightaway starts. So I should have, because I'm turned in, right? I should have already made my lift at this point. Now look, I've made my lift here. I'm now back to full power, probably right about here, right? I should be back to full power a car length earlier than that, and more modulating that throttle in. So if I would have made a lift earlier, right, I wouldn't slow down as much, pick up the throttle a little bit earlier, full power earlier, I'm on the straightaway longer. Solid through 10, but definitely 11, we have some time to gain. So I do like that we were attacking the entry more, like we talked about in the first video. But again, we're catching ourselves of holding that heavy pressure, like I talked about in the beginning of the video, holding that heavy pressure too long. So yeah, we're heavy, and then so you do a little bit better job trailing it off there a little bit. But as we turn in, we're just holding that heavy pressure too long, and our minimum speed through the center of the corner suffers because of that. Good job getting out of the corner. Down the start finish. So like I said, in general, huge improvement over the last, from 2018, I guess. So big improvement there. I think I really want us to work on our braking a little bit. And then just kind of thinking about those transitions in the S's, kind of where our minimum speed should be, like in the carousel and the S's, and just kind of cleaning that up a little bit. And I think we can definitely, take some time off the next time you're at Sonoma. But also a lot of these things are things you should be thinking about if you go to, any other tracks. If you're going to Thunder Hill, if you're going to Laguna Seca, if you're going to Willow, all these concepts are concepts you're going to apply to every track you go to. It's not just specific to Sonoma. So that's also something you can take away from this. So once again, I'll have a corner by corner breakdown per the usual, and you can print this out, and some of them will be, more general, like we talked about, for any track you go to. But thanks again, and best of luck the next time you're on track.